Hi everybody! Today's story is Thumbelina. Now, don't forget to listen to the end for a shout out because it might be you today. Let's see. Thumbelina. There was once a woman who wished for a very little child, but she didn't know where she could procure one from. So she went to an old witch and said, "Oh, I do so very much wish for a little child. Can you not tell me where I can get one?" "Oh, that can be easily managed," said the witch. "There you have a barleycorn that is not the kind which grows in the countryman's field and which the chickens get to eat. Put it in a flower pot and you shall see what you shall see." "Oh, thank you," said the woman, and she gave the witch some money. Then she went home and planted the barleycorn, and immediately there grew up a handsome flower which looked like a tulip, but the leaves were tightly closed as though it was still a bud. "Oh, it's a beautiful flower," said the woman, and she kissed its beautiful yellow and red leaves. But just as she kissed it, the flower opened with a loud crack. It was a real tulip, as one could now see, but in the middle of the flower there sat upon the green stamens a little maiden, delicate and graceful to behold. She was scarcely half a thumb in length in height, and therefore she was called Thumbelina. A neat polished walnut shell served Thumbelina for a cradle. Blue violet leaves were her mattresses, with a rose leaf for a coverlet. There she slept at night, but in the daytime she played upon the table where the woman had put a plate with a wreath of flowers around it, whose stalk stood in water, and on the water swam a great tulip leaf, and on this the little maiden would sit and row from one side of the plate to the other, with two white horses for oars. That looked pretty indeed. She could also sing, and indeed so delicately and sweetly that the like had never been heard. Oh. One night, as she lay in her pretty bed, there came a horrid old toad, rabbit, rabbit, hopping up the window, in which one pane was broken. The toad was very big and very ugly and damp. It hopped straight down onto the table where Thumbelina lay sleeping under a red rose leaf. "That would be a handsome wife for my son," said the toad. "Rabbit, rabbit." And she took the walnut shell in which Thumbelina lay asleep and hopped with it through the window and down the garden. There ran a great broad brook, but the margin was swampy and soft, and here the toad dwelt with her son. Oh, he was ugly and looked like his mother. Ribbit, ribbit. That was all he could say, and when he saw the graceful little maiden in the walnut shell, he said it again. "Rabbit, rabbit." "Don't speak so loud, or she'll awake," said the old toad. "She might run away from us yet, for she's as light as a bit of the swan's down," so she's light as a feather. "We will put her out in the brook upon one of the broad water lily leaves. That will be just like an island for her. She's so small and light. Then she can't get away while we put the stateroom under the mud in order where you are to live and keep house together." So they're going to put her onto a leaf in them so she can't get away. That's dreadful. They've kidnapped her. Out in the brook there grew many water lilies with broad green leaves, which looked as if they were floating on the water. The leaf which lay furthest away was also the greatest of all, and to that the old toad swam out and laid the walnut shell upon it with Thumbelina in it. The poor little thing woke early in the morning, and when she saw where she was, she began to cry very bitterly, for there was water on every side of the great green leaf, and she could not get to the land at all. The old toad sat down in the mud, decking out the room with sedges and yellow water lilies. It was to be made very pretty for the new daughter-in-law. Then she swam out with her ugly son to the leaf on which Thumbelina was. They wanted to take her pretty bed, which was to be put in the bridal chamber before she went there herself. The old toad bowed low before her in the water and said, "Ribbit, ribbit, here is my son, and he will be your husband, and you will live splendidly together in the mud. Ribbit, 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 was all the son could say. Then they took the elegant little bed and swam away with it. But Thumbelina sat alone in the green leaf and wept, for she did not like to live at the nasty toads and to have her ugly son for a husband. The little fishes swimming around in the water below had seen the toad and also heard what she said. Therefore, they stretched forth their heads, for they wanted to see the little girl. So as soon as they saw her, they considered her so pretty that they felt very sorry that she should have to go down with it to the ugly toad. No, that must never be. They assembled together in the water around the green stalk which held the leaf on which the little maiden stood, and with their teeth they gnawed away at the stalk so that the leaf swam down the stream, and away went Thumbelina far away, where the toads could not get her. The fish of freedom. Now, Thumbelina sailed by many places, and the little birds which sat in the bushes saw her and said, "Oh, what a lovely little girl, tweet, tweet." The leaf swam away with her, and farther, so Thumbelina travelled out of the country. A graceful little white butterfly continued to flutter around her, and at last alighted on the leaf. Thumbelina pleased him, and she was so delighted, for now the toad could not reach her, and she was so beautiful where she was floating along, and the sun shone upon the water. It was just like shining gold. She took her girdle and bound one end of it around the butterfly, fastening the other end to the ribbon to the leaf. The leaf now glided onwards much faster, and Thumbelina too, for she stood upon the leaf. So she's tied the little leaf to the butterfly so she can go faster away. There came a big cockchafer flying up, and he saw her and immediately glanced his claws around her slender waist and flew with her up into a tree. Now the green leaf went swimming down the brook, and the butterfly with it, for it was fastened to the leaf and could not get away from it. Mercy! How frightened poor little Thumbelina was when the cockchafer flew with her up to the tree. But especially she was sorry for the fine white butterfly, who she'd bound fast to the leaf, for it couldn't set itself free from it, and would be forced to starve to death. The cockchafer, however, did not trouble himself with that at all. He seated himself with her on the biggest green leaf of his tree, and gave her the sweet part of the flowers to eat, and declared that she was very pretty, though she did not in the least resemble a cockchafer. Afterwards came all the other cockchafers who lived there in the tree to pay a visit. They looked at Thumbelina. The lady cockchafer shrugged their feelers and said, "Well, why she hasn't even got any more than 2 legs. That's a wretched appearance. And she's not even got any feelers," cried another. "Her waist is quite slender. Ooh, she looks like a human creature. How ugly she is," said all the lady cockchafers. And yet Thumbelina was very pretty. Even the cockchafer who had carried her off thought so. But when all the others declared that she was ugly, he believed it at last and didn't want to have her at all. She might go whither she liked. And then he flew down with her from the tree and set her upon a daisy, and she wept because she was so ugly that the cockchafers wouldn't even have her. And yet she was the loveliest thing ever anyone could imagine, as tender and delicate as a rose leaf. So the whole summer through, poor Thumbelina lived quite alone in the great wood. She wove herself a bed out of blades of grass and hung it up under a large burdock leaf, so that she was protected from the rain. She plucked the honey out of the flowers for food, and she drank the dew which every morning was on the leaves. Thus summer and autumn passed away, but now became winter, cold, long winter. All the birds who had sung so sweetly to her flew away. Trees and flowers shed their leaves. The great burdock leaf under which she had lived shriveled up, and there remained nothing of it but a yellow, withered stalk. She was dreadfully cold, for her clothes were torn, and she herself was so frail and delicate. The poor little Thumbelina, She was nearly frozen. It began to snow, and every snowflake that fell on her was like a whole shovel of snow falling on one of us, because we're tall and she was only an inch long, half a thumb. Then she wrapped herself in a dry leaf, but that could not keep her warm. Oh, she shivered. Oh, with the cold. Bet her teeth were chattering. Your teeth chatter. Oh, can you make them chatter? Oh. Close to the wood into which she had now come lay a great cornfield, but the corn was long ago gone. Only the naked dry stubble stood on the frozen ground. These were just like great forests for her to wander through, and oh, how she trembled with the cold when she arrived at the door of a field mouse. Now this mouse had a little hole under the stubble. That's where the field mouse lived, warm and comfortable. He had a whole room full of corn and a glorious kitchen and larder. Poor Thumbelina stood at the door, just like a poor beggar girl, and begged for a little bit of barleycorn, for she'd not had the smallest morsel to eat for the last 2 days. Imagine that, not having anything to eat for a whole 2 days. Oh, no. Now the mouse was, oh, you poor little creature, said the field mouse, for after all she was a good old field mouse. Oh, thank goodness. Come into my warm and dine with me. As she was pleased with Thumbelina, she said, if you like, you may stay with me through the winter, but you must keep my room clean and neat and tell me stories, for I am very fond of them. Oh, we've got a mouse who likes stories. That's good. And Thumbelina did as the kind old field mouse bade her, and had a very good time of it. Now we shall soon have a visitor, said the field mouse. My neighbour is in the habit of visiting me once a week. He is even better off than I am. He has great rooms and a beautiful black velvety fur. If you could only get him for your husband, you would be well provided for. But he cannot see it all, so you must tell him the very prettiest stories that you know. But Thumbelina didn't care about this. She would not have had a neighbour at all, for he was a mole. He came and paid his visits in his black velvet coat. The field mouse told how rich and how learned he was, and how his house was more than 20 times larger than hers, and that he had learning, but that he did not like the sun and beautiful flowers, and said nasty things about them, for he had never even seen them. Thumbelina had to sing, and she sang, cock, cock, Jaffa, fly away, and when the parson goes afield. Then the mole fell in love with her because of her delicate voice, but he said nothing, for he was a sedate man, a bit shy maybe. A short time before, he had dug a long passage through the earth from his house to theirs, and Thumbelina and the field mouse obtained leave to walk in the passage as much as they wished. But he begged them not to be afraid of the dead bird which was laying in the passage. It was an entire bird with wings and a beak. It certainly must have died only a short time before, when the winter began, and was now buried just where the mole had made his passage. Oh, heck. The mole took a bit of decayed wood from his mouth, for that glimmers like fire in the dark, and then he went first and lighted them through the long passage. So it was like a match. He had a fire so he could see the way, like a torch. When they came where the dead bird lay, the mole thrust up his broad nose against the ceiling and pushed the earth so that a great hole was made. I don't know if you've seen moles, but they can make holes. You can make big lumps of soil, and you can see where they've been. So that a great hole was made through which the daylight could shine. In the middle of the floor lay a dead swallow. His beautiful wings pressed close against his sides, and his head and feet were drawn under his feathers. The poor bird had certainly died of the cold. Thumbelina was very sorry for this. She was very fond of all the little birds who had sung and twittered so prettily for her through the summer. But the mole gave him a push with his short legs and said, now, he didn't pipe any more. It must be miserable to be born a little bird. I'm thankful that none of my children can be that. Such a bird has nothing but his tweet, tweet, and has to starve in the winter. Yes, you may well say that, like a sensible man, observed the field mouse. All of what use is this? Tweet, tweet, to a bird when the winter comes. He must starve and freeze. but they say that's very aristocratic." Thumbelina said nothing, but when the two others turned their backs on the bird, she bent down, put the feathers aside which covered his head, and kissed him upon his closed eyes. "Perhaps it was he who sang prettily to me in the summer," she thought. "How much pleasure he gave me, the dear beautiful bird." The mole now closed up the hole through which the daylight shone in and accompanied the ladies home. But at night Thumbelina couldn't sleep at all, so she got up out of her bed and wove a large beautiful carpet of hay and carried it and spread it over the dead bird, and laid soft cotton, which she had found in the field mouse's room, at the bird's side, so that the bird might lie warm in the cold ground. "Oh, farewell, you pretty little bird," she said. "Farewell, and thanks to you for your beautiful song in the summer when all the trees were green and the sun shone down warmly upon us." And then she laid her head on the bird's breast, but at once was greatly startled, for it felt as if there was something beating inside there. That was the bird's heart. The bird wasn't dead. He was only lying there with the cold. Now he'd been warmed up and he came to life again. In autumn, all the swallows fly away to warm countries, but if one happens to be belated and it becomes so cold that it falls down as if dead, it lies where it falls, and then the snow covers it. Thumbelina fairly trembled. She was so startled, for the bird was very, very large compared with her, who was only an inch in height. But she took courage, laid the cotton closer around the poor bird, brought a leaf of mint that she had used for her own coverlet, and laid it over the bird's head. The next night she crept out again to him, and now he was alive but quite weak. But he could open his eyes and for a moment and look at Thumbelina, who stood there before him with a bit of decayed wood in her hand, for she had no other lantern. "I thank you, pretty little child," said the sick swallow. "If I have been famously warmed, soon I shall get my strength back again, and I shall be able to fly about in the warm sunshine." She said, "It's so cold without. It snows and freezes. Stay in your warm bed and I'll nurse you." Then she brought the swallow water and a petal of a flower, and the swallow drank and told her how he had torn one of his wings on a thorn bush, and thus had not been able to fly as fast as the other swallows, which had sped away far away to the warm countries. So at last he had fallen to the ground, but he could remember nothing more, and did not know at all how he had come where she had found him to be. The whole winter the swallow remained there, and Thumbelina nursed and tended him heartily. Neither the field mouse nor the mole heard anything about it, for they did not like the poor swallow. So soon as the spring came and the sun warmed the earth, the swallow bade Thumbelina farewell. She opened the hole which the mole had made in the ceiling. The sun shone upon them gloriously, and the swallow asked if Thumbelina would go with him. She could sit on his back, and they would fly away into the green wood. But Thumbelina knew that the old field mouse would grieve if she left her. "No, I can't," said Thumbelina. "Well, farewell, you pretty, pretty good girl," said the swallow, and he flew into the sunshine. Thumbelina had looked after him, and the tears came to her eyes because she was so, so fond of the poor swallow. "Tweet, tweet, tweet, tweet," sang the bird, and flew into the green forest. Thumbelina felt very sad. She did not get permission to go out in the warm sunshine. The corn, which was sown in the field over the house of the field mouse, grew up high in the air. It was quite a thick wood for the poor girl, who was only a little inch in height. "Now you must work at your outfit this summer," said the field mouse to her, for a neighbour, the tiresome mole with the velvet coat, had proposed to her. Oh, he wanted to marry her. You shall have woolen and linen clothes both. You will lack nothing when you come to be the mole's wife." Thumbelina had to turn the spindle, and the mole hired 4 spiders to spin and weave for her all day and night. Every evening the mole paid her a visit, and he was always saying that when the summer should draw to a close, the sun would not shine clearly so hot, for that now it burned the earth almost as hard as stone. Yes, when the summer should have gone, then he would keep his wedding day with Thumbelina. But she was not glad at all, for she didn't like the tiresome mole. Every morning when the sun rose and every evening when it went down, she crept out of the door. And when the wind blew the corn ears apart so that she could see the blue sky, she thought how bright and beautiful it was out there, and she wished so much to see her dear swallow again. But the swallow didn't come back. He had doubtless flown far away in the green forest. When autumn came on, Thumbelina had all of her outfit ready. In 4 weeks you shall celebrate your wedding, said the field mouse to her. But Thumbelina cried. She declared that she wouldn't have the tiresome mole. Nonsense, said the field mouse. Don't be obstinate, or I will bite you with my white teeth. He is a very fine man, and whom you will marry him. The queen herself has not such a black velvet fur coat like that, and his kitchen and cellar are full. Be thankful for your good fortune. Now the wedding was to be held, and the mole had already come to fetch Thumbelina. She was to live with him deep under the earth and never come out into the warm sunshine, for that he did not like. But the poor little thing was very sorrowful. She was now to say farewell to the glorious sun, which, after all, she'd been allowed by the field mouse to see from the threshold of the door. Farewell, thou bright sun, she said, and she stretched out her arms towards it and walked a little way forth from the house of the field mouse, for now the corn had been reaped and only the dry stubble stood in the fields. Farewell, she repeated, and threw her little arms round the little red flower which still bloomed there. Greet the dear swallow for me if you see her again. Tweet, 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 tweet. A voice suddenly sounded over her head. She looked up. It was the swallow who was just flying by. When he saw Thumbelina, he was very glad. And Thumbelina told him how loth she was to have the ugly mole for her husband, and that she was to live deep under the earth where the sun never shone, and she could not refrain from weeping. The cold winter is coming now, said the swallow. I'm going to fly far away into the warm countries. Will you come with me? You can sit on my back, only tie yourself fast with your sash, and we'll fly from the ugly mole and his dark room far away over the mountains to the warm countries where the sun shines more beautifully than here, where it's always summer and there are lovely flowers. Only fly with me, you dear little Thumbelina, you saved my life when I lay in the frozen dark. Yes, I'll go with you, said Thumbelina, and she seated herself on the bird's back with her feet on his outspread wings and bound her girdle fast to one of his strongest feathers. Then the swallow flew up into the air, over the forest, over the sea, high over the great mountains where the snow always lies, and Thumbelina felt cold in the bleak air, but she crept under the bird's warm feathers and only put out a little head to admire all the beauties beneath her. At last they came to the warm countries. It's like going on holiday. There the sun shone far brighter there, and the sky seemed twice as high. The ditches and on the hedges grew the most beautiful and green grapes. Lemons and oranges hung in the woods, and the air was fragrant with myrtles and balsams, and on the roads the loveliest children ran about playing with the gay butterflies. But the swallow flew still farther, and it became more and more beautiful. Under the most glorious green trees by the blue lake stood a palace of dazzling white marble from an olden time. Vines clustered round the lofty pillars. At the top were many swallows' nests, and in one of these the swallow lived who had carried Thumbelina. Here's my house, said the swallow, but if you will select for yourself one of those splendid flowers which grow down yonder, then I'll put you in it, and you shall have everything as nice as you can wish for. That is capital, she said, and she clapped her little hands. A great marble pillar lay there, which had fallen to the ground and had been broken into 3 pieces, but between these pieces grew the most beautiful great white flowers. The swallow flew down with Thumbelina and set her upon one of the broad leaves. But how great was the little maid's surprise, because there sat a little man in the midst of the flower, as white and transparent as if he had been made of glass. He wore the daintiest of gold crowns on his head and the brightest wings on his shoulders. He himself was not bigger than Thumbelina. He was the angel of the flower. In each of the flowers dwelt such a little man or woman, but this one was the king over them all. Heavens, how beautiful he is, whispered Thumbelina to the swallow. The little prince was very much frightened at the swallow, for it was quite a great big gigantic bird to him because he was so small. But when he saw Thumbelina, he became very glad. She was the prettiest maiden he had ever seen. Therefore, he took off his golden crown and he put it upon her and asked her name and if she would be his wife, and then she should be queen of all the flowers. Now, this was truly a different kind of man to the son of the toad and the mole with the black velvet fur. She said, therefore, yes, to the charming prince. And out of every flower came a lady or a lord, so pretty to behold that it was a delight. Each one brought Thumbelina a present, but the best gift was a pair of beautiful wings which had belonged to a great white fly. These were fastened to Thumbelina's back, and now she could fly from flower to flower. Then there was much rejoicing, and the swallow sat above them in her nest and sung for them as well as she could. But yet in her heart she was sad, for she was so fond of Thumbelina and would have liked never to have parted from her. You shall not be called Thumbelina, said the flower angel to her. That is an ugly name, and you are too fair for it. We will call you Maya. Farewell, farewell, said the swallow, and she flew away from the warm countries, far away back to Denmark. There she had a little nest over a window of a man who can tell fairy tales. So to him she sang, tweet, 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 tweet. And from him we learned this story. Thumbelina, Thumbelina, tiny little thing. That's a little song I used to know about that. Anyway, shout out time. I wonder if you know any songs like that about Thumbelina. Shout out time today. I am going to shout out to somebody who has the name of a flower. I know there are lots of flowers. We said there were roses and there were daisies and there's tulips, but the flower that I know is called Violet. So today my shout out is to you, Violet. I hope you enjoyed the story of Thumbelina as much as I did. Till next time, bye.